Hello, friends. My name is Lachlan Mackay, and it's my privilege to introduce longtime friend Jill Brim as she shares her presidential address. Our session this evening is sponsored by SeekYeBestBooks.com, Daniel M. Kelty Books and Research. This session will be recorded. If you have questions for Jill, please use the Q&A feature, not the chat, the Q&A, at the bottom of your screen. You are welcome to use the chat to communicate with each other. Born in Chicago, Jill Brim's maternal family were fourth-generation Irish Americans. Her father was from Hannibal and talked about his great-grandfather, who was a Baptist preacher in rural Marion County, Missouri. As a result, Jill developed an interest in how religious communities thrive. While walking through Nauvoo in 1969, Jill was intrigued by a placard at a foundation labeled Joseph Smith's Brick Store. She began recording events that had taken place in that unique building. At BYU, she worked as a student secretary for Larry Porter, professor of church history and doctrine. Larry served as secretary-treasurer of the Mormon History Association. So Jill took phone calls from Alma Blair as the two professors arranged for Graceland historians to visit BYU. Larry encouraged Jill to continue her research into the Red Brick Store. Jill married her husband Greg in the Salt Lake Temple, and on their honeymoon they visited church history sites en route to an open house in Chicago. Just before entering the Liberty Jail for a tour, Greg ate an unusual tuna fish sandwich for lunch that landed him in the hospital in Hannibal by nightfall. After Greg checked himself out of the hospital, they made a fast run through Nauvoo, then made it to Chicago for the festivities. After raising 4 children, Jill received her MA from the University of Chicago, writing about the Red Brick Store. She taught seminary for 7 years, followed by teaching at the College of DuPage in Glen Ellen, Illinois. For 10 years, she coordinated with Rosalind Seaver at the Joseph Smith Historic Site. Rosalind was the last surviving witness of the 1928 reinternment of Joseph and Hiram Smith. So Jill coordinated with Rosalind for a number of years in planning Nauvoo historical trips for Chicago Relief Society, youth groups, and the BYU Alumni Chicago Chapter. Jill now teaches U.S. history and humanities at Dixie State University and is still interested in how religious communities thrive. She is grateful for her JWHA friends who have given her valuable insights through the years. Jill.
Thank you, Locke. Thanks to all of you. It's just a thrill to be with you this evening after this wonderful conference. We're delighted to have you here. This evening, I'm going to be speaking about Joseph Smith's Red Brick Store. The land surrounding the Red Brick Store has attracted ancient peoples to its limestone flats and rising bluffs for 10 millennia. Archaeological digs performed during the last 50 years provide evidence indicating the presence of not only artifacts from the 1840s era, but also prehistoric burial sites and burial cairns. Oops. Thank you. Paul DeBarth, lead archaeologist for the Joseph Smith Historic Sites, has participated in digs since 1971. Paul, along with archaeology professors, students, volunteers, and family members, has uncovered thousands of artifacts now in the Red Brick Store basement, carefully sorted and labeled. I look forward to Paul's future writings on Nauvoo archaeology. As the digs involving the University of Missouri at Columbia were taking place, students called by Nauvoo Restoration, Inc. were leading guided tours of sites investigated by Dale Burge and others in the 1970s. Students from NRI were housed in the Visitor Center, formerly an Icarian school made of temple blocks. T. Edgar Lyon would offer Nauvoo history classes to the guides and their guests. At the 2019 JWHA conference in Rochester, Paul DeBarth offered to compose original poems for the silent auction. I was lucky enough to successfully bid on one of the poems, requesting as the subject Joseph Smith's Red Brick Store. Paul responded with the following poem describing the ancient burials in Nauvoo compared to the 1840s store, both at the same site. 2,000 years, add 500 to see the burial span. To the first pottery makers, early woodland, known as black sand. 4 stages of their burials, last with woman and neonate, between her thighs, toothpick ribs, membranous cranial plate. And then the middle woodland Indians, 14 clustered near the store. A 30-year-old man, just 20 feet from the back door. 1,000 miles of gathering 2,000 years ago, marking this place sacred for those who care to know. A difference in their structures, though, merits study to explore. Cairns for the prehistoric, for the Mormons, a red brick store. The plaster on the south end showed paint of a mural type, presumably from the office where Smith claimed great insight. The remaining plaster was curiously found to have been painted red. No windows on the east or west, so lighting was oil-fed. Flemish bond in the brick to make the exterior look nice. Barrels of goods inside full of candy, tools, fabric, and spice. An office where the prophet gained inspiration and where some affirm he anointed his oldest son. An upper room where women established the Relief Society to encourage social service, humanitarian help, propriety. Meeting place 2 for the Olive Branch, a group of saints seeking peace, the Zionic cause to enhance. As the Saints began an impressive building program in Nauvoo, the building with immediate importance in the fledgling city was undoubtedly Joseph Smith's Red Brick Store. Not only a general store supplying dry goods, but the headquarters of the significant municipal and ecclesiastical meetings. In 1842, Nauvoo citizenry often found moments to venture into Joseph Smith's Red Brick Store. Owned and built by the prophet, here one could leisurely find supplies, obtain land contracts, and record financial dealings. Also, quorum and council members might hustle to the back of the store to climb the stairs to the second floor lively meetings. The members of the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo met there, but would eventually outgrow the store's second floor space. The original Relief Society minutes record unique sermons preached by Joseph to the sisters in the store. Charitable efforts were organized there as well. Behind the first floor counters, Joseph could provide items for his clientele, mainly those who had suffered in the name of the church in Missouri. He could also discuss new community plans and doctrine with converts arriving in Nauvoo on the Mississippi River. Although 35 plus stores would be built in this dynamic city, Joseph's store became a riveting center of activity. Joseph was delighted to open the doors of the Red Brick Store for business on January 1, 1842. After months of incarceration, separated from church members who were evicted from the state of Missouri, Joseph had now built a 2-story brick general store that was certainly impressive by local standards. One would have to travel to St. Louis to find a mercantile institution of this stature. Joseph wrote to his friend and colleague, Edward Hunter, quote, I am happy that it is my privilege to say to you that the large building which I had commenced when you were here is now completed, and the doors are open this day for the sale of goods for the first time. The foundation of the building is somewhat spacious, as you will doubtless recollect for a country store. With the impressive size of the red brick store, one wonders how Joseph Smith obtained the plans for the construction. With few two-story stores in the area, where did Joseph discover this gabled warehouse design that could accommodate so many supplies as well as space for well-attended meetings? As Roger Lanius and Mark McKiernan wrote in their monograph, Joseph Smith's Red Brick Store, the closest general stores in Iowa and Missouri were modest one-story log establishments. After conversations with two historians, Roger Lanius and Kathleen Conzen of the University of Chicago, here are two ideas. First, Roger suggests that the designs for the red brick store might have been purchased in a book like Architect Asher Benjamin. He had a very popular 7-set of plans that were extremely popular until the 1860s. He was a carpenter who began designing homes in the Northeast. His plans then blossomed into his book set that became extremely popular. The American Builder's Companion, or A New System of Architecture. Roger Lanius remarked that there were other plan books also available, allowing builders a start in constructing needed homes on the frontier. Kathleen Conzen of the University of Chicago felt that the more likely model for the red brick store is the fur warehouse of John Jacob Astor in Prairie du Chien, Wisconsin. Astor's fur warehouse was located 230 miles north of Nauvoo on the Mississippi River. Astor opened his own fur trade shop in New York in 1786. Initially, he often traveled into the wilderness to secure furs for his shop. A few years later, he made his first real estate investment, followed then by the merging of all of his fur businesses into the American Fur Company in 1808. The American Fur Warehouse in Prairie du Chien was constructed in 1828. This stone building, one of the company's principal establishments, reflected the strength of Prairie du Chien as a fur trading center. Just as Asher had searched for furs himself, the fur traders took birch bark canoes into the smaller rivers off the Mississippi and wintered with the neighboring tribes, such as the Winnebago. Traders would paddle back to Prairie du Chien and deposit their beaver pelts in the Astor warehouse. Tribes would eventually come directly to the warehouse with their furs. A French trader, Jean Rolette, in Prairie du Chien, also bought a sawmill in nearby Black River Falls, trying to augment his income, adding to the very active river community. George Miller of Adams County had been involved with milling operations in Warsaw in 1837, one full year before he was converted to the church. He had dealings with logging mills in Black River Falls, undoubtedly passing Prairie du Chien. So it seems likely that George Miller could have told Joseph Smith of the Astor warehouse design, safe enough to store furs from vandals and sturdy enough to have multiple shipments of goods delivered or dragged right to the door from the nearby Mississippi to waiting stock shelves. Also, George Miller would have informed Joseph about the Wisconsin pine stands that could provide easily accessed timber for the Nauvoo building boom. BYU's Dennis Rowley wrote that the first cabins and shanties in Nauvoo were built almost entirely of logs and poles due to the scarcity of locally harvested timber and the prohibitive cost of Eastern lumber. The small amounts of timber that were available on the Mississippi were quickly seized by enterprising fur traders and farmers in need of extra cash. As a result of Joseph Smith's revelation to build the Nauvoo house and the temple simultaneously, the need for lumber in Nauvoo increased markedly early in 1841. The relative lack of currency in Nauvoo's barter economy was strengthened with the sale of surplus lumber in Nauvoo to individuals for their personal use. The church decided to establish sawmills at the Black River, believing that mills could be established at virtually no cost other than for the mill equipment. With a steady lumber supply on the horizon, one committee was formed to handle the fundraising and the construction of the temple, and another committee for the Nauvoo house. Lyman White and George Miller, later helped by Henry Miller, were principal members of these committees, meeting in the red brick store. The costs of the pinery enterprise were to be shared equally by these two committees, who were entitled then to equal share of the harvested lumber. The workmen at the Wisconsin pineries, along with the workmen at the temple, were all considered temple laborers. Joseph periodically had to talk with local laborers, as some felt that their wages were not sufficient. In Nauvoo, many temple workers received in-kind wages for their hours of service. 3 companies of logging missionaries, some with families, were called to the Wisconsin pineries. The first group left Nauvoo fully outfitted. Rowley wrote, Hiram W. Mikesell and his wife were examples of pinery seasonal workers who were employed from October 42 to July 43. They owed $44 for goods drawn from the Wisconsin committee store. They settled their bill in March of 1844 in Nauvoo, and the balance due was credited to Hiram's tithing in the amount of $205 and to his wife's tithing in the amount of $62.50. Among the supplies they used during those 8 months were 3 shirts, 1 1/4 buckskin, 60 yards of fabric, 2 pairs of boots, 6 pairs of shoes, 2 pairs of moccasins, 1 cap, 1 almanac, and $1. All of the workers drew clothing in similar fashion. Many of the men were also issued lead powder and axes. After Peter Hawes' arrival in the pineries, he continued to run the company store from which the members of the company could draw as needed. Alan Stout described the communal aspects of their little community in a letter to his brother Hosea Stout. We have gone into the whole law of God on Black River. That is, every man has given a schedule of his property to the bishop, and we have all things common according to the law in the Book of Covenants. Every man has his own goods to do what he pleases. We are all on an equality. Every man fares alike, labors alike, eats, drinks, and wears alike, but at the same time, he lives to himself. The cold was overwhelming in Wisconsin with goods scarce, but people at the pineries began living a more normal life as time went by. 3 of Lyman White's children, a son and 2 daughters, actually had a triple wedding on February the 6th, 1844. One of the daughters marrying George Miller's son. Pinery workers, though, would still journey to Nauvoo on a regular basis, having financial ties to the red brick store. The 19th century store owner not only succeeded as he sold goods in exchange for local butter, eggs, or produce, but often he was the capitalist as he initiated local ventures such as water mills or manufacturing. He seemed to relish the title of merchant as he doubled his profits by milling the grains that he sold. Joseph Smith wrote to saints in other cities, asking them to consider moving to Nauvoo, bringing engines that could be used in milling operations. Other opportunities materialized, such as the selling of potash, from the ashes of nearby cleared forests. Store owners often served as the banker or local ship owner, transporting goods to nearby ports, which we know Joseph did. Joseph began researching ships that would bring people and goods to Nauvoo at reasonable prices. One of the marks of the truly successful shopkeeper was his ability to change circumstances in times of financial panic and distress. Here is where Joseph Smith struggled, as he tried to have his store serve as both a successful mercantile establishment and a storehouse for the destitute of Nauvoo. Soon, Joseph would abandon the first floor sales. He would search or advertise for store managers to take over the still active store. On March 4th, 1843, in the council room of the red brick store, Joseph and the Nauvoo City Council attempted to solve the currency and counterfeiting crisis. They had a four-pronged approach to their ordinance. Number one, gold and silver coin can only be received as lawful tender in payment. Number two, that city script shall not hereafter be emitted as moneyed currency. 3, that any person assigning counterfeit gold, silver, or copper coin shall be liable to a fine not exceeding $5,000 or to imprisonment or hard labor in the city. 4, that any person passing paper currency or aiding and abetting therein shall then be liable to a fine of $1 for every paper dollar that is offered or passed. Glenn Leonard wrote, municipal leaders had hoped to protect new immigrants from the burden of worthless paper money. To demonstrate his compliance, Joseph Smith even burned $81 worth of his own money. In two later ordinances regarding Nauvoo currency, the city council first allowed for scrip for payments for bills, debts, and fines. And then actually they repealed gold and silver payment in Nauvoo, permitting script for all financial transactions. So we found in Nauvoo, as in most locations in the United States, post-Panic of 1837, especially on the struggling frontier, hard currency had just become too difficult to procure. Nauvoo bartering took on an interesting dimension. Instead of just trading items of approximate equal worth with the store or with your neighbor, Nauvoo bartering added a few layers to the transactions. Being a communal society, Joseph did ask individuals to donate large amounts of cash and goods to stock the shelves of the red brick store. Donations that he would then count as tithing payments, temple contributions, or payments towards past land purchases. Labor crews were constantly in operation, tithing 1 day in 10 in order to complete the temple. Full-time laborers were paid by in-kind tithing payments made to the temple recorder, whose office was on the first floor of the red brick store. Wilford Woodruff recorded in his journal that on January 17, 1842, I spent the day butchering 20 hogs for the Nauvoo house. I attended council at Joseph's office with the 12. So Wilford would butcher the hogs with the credit going on his account at the Nauvoo house. Perishable meat would most likely go immediately to workers as payment for wages. Some meat could be cured and sold at a later date. Ice houses did exist, and Paul DeBarth writes, on the north side of the mansion north wing stood a brick structure of 5 to 7 feet with a substantial limestone foundation and an abundance of mortar indicating a clean function. Chess pieces and numerous ceramics of the period were found as well, along with an ice saw fragment and ice tongs. I think it was an ice house shaded by the mansion. Ida Bloom, a Nauvoo historian descended from the Icarians, in an interview later in her life, describes several ice houses in Nauvoo, but earlier 1840 examples seem to be scarce. Another example of this triangular type of bartering can be seen with hopes of homes being built, sponsored by the Relief Society, providing housing for families. Okay. This example comes from the Relief Society minutes. The President Smith then said that he would give a lot of land to the society by deeding it to the treasurer, that the society may build houses for the poor. He also said he would give a house, frame not finished, said that Brother Reynolds Cahoon will move it onto the aforesaid lot, and the society can pay him by giving orders on the store, that it was a good plan to set those to work who are owing widows and thus make an offset. So with this plan, employment, housing for families, and movement of goods could be accomplished with the Relief Society supervising. Great concern existed in the Relief Society that widows were not being provided means to earn a living. Needlework and sewing were then advertised. Children were present in the red brick store and the nearby open spaces. Joseph Smith III had memories of visiting the store only to find his father and other residents participating in wrestling matches on the open space to the west of the store. In an interview, Elizabeth Watts of Cache Valley, Utah, remembered playing with other children in the upstairs room of the Prophet store in Nauvoo. The children amused themselves by lowering a long stick through a knot hole in the floor to a sugar barrel on the first floor below, then licking the stick. School classes were held on the second floor. Because of the disturbances of the young students, their instructors were finally asked to move them on to a new location, Henry Miller's home. If the students were not welcome due to continuous noise, I think the sugar incident surely sealed their fate and they were out the door. The red brick store would soon have all prominent meetings on the second floor, with Joseph Smith taking a leading role in many cases. As other warehouses on the Mississippi River would serve primarily as grain storage, the red brick store, on the other hand, quickly held meetings dealing with intricate city plans to address security and legal proceedings. These are the names that Joseph and others referred to in describing the rooms of the second floor of the red brick store: assembly room, council chamber, general business office, high council room, large assembly room, the lodge room, municipal court, my office, mayor's office, the research room, and Joseph's office. The Nauvoo City Council met often in the red brick store, dealing with demanding health issues such as cemeteries, animal carcass removal, and the hiring of city workers. The red brick store was home to priesthood quorums. Joseph Smith worked on new scripture, including the Doctrine and Covenants and the Book of Abraham. The store was a parade of those longing to be near the prophet, discussing town needs and important church issues. Here are just a few calendar items showing Joseph's heavy load in the store. From road repair to sacred ritual, he championed it all. The months of March to May in 1842 welcomed new meetings to the red brick store. A new Masonic lodge was formed in Nauvoo, meeting on the second floor. Joseph had been publicly installed as a Mason on March 15th and on March 16th in a private meeting in the store. When I visited the beautiful Iowa Masonic Library and Museum in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, repository of the daybook of the red brick store, I asked one of the librarians why he felt the Masonic effort in Nauvoo had not succeeded. I said that Joseph Smith seemed hopeful that becoming members of this fraternal organization might provide valuable friendships. The very helpful librarian answered that in his opinion, the speed with which Nauvoo residents were admitted as Masons might have been a problem. He also mentioned priesthood connections. On March 17, 1842, the Female Relief Society of Nauvoo would be organized with Emma Smith as president. Her two counselors, Sarah M. Cleveland and Elizabeth Ann Whitney, were sisters in the gospel who had provided Emma's family lodging in more desperate hours in Kirtland and Quincy. On May 4th to 5th, 1842, Joseph asked a few brethren to carry supplies to the upper floor of the store for a special endowment for a few elders. Murals, trees, and curtains were arranged to resemble the interior of the temple. The Joseph Smith Papers Project website states, May 4 to 5, 1842. Joseph Smith presented sacred ceremonies and instructions known as endowment to Hiram Smith, Brigham Young, and others in the upper room of his mercantile store, Nauvoo, Illinois. On January 17, 1844, Joseph Smith III received a blessing from his father, Joseph Smith Jr., naming him his successor. On January 29, 1844, Joseph held a historic meeting in the mayor's office with the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, deciding to run for president of the United States. With no response or unsatisfactory responses from the presidential candidates Joseph Smith had contacted concerning redress, Joseph launched a campaign. The Council of 50. On March 10, 1844, Joseph Smith received two letters from George Miller and Lyman White, church leaders at the Wisconsin Pineries, that proposed sending missionaries to Texas, scouting possible areas for church relocation. These letters were presented to President Joseph Smith the afternoon of Sunday, March 10, 1844. Some conversations were had on the subject of a meeting appointed in the evening to be held over the store at early candlelight. The 12 were notified to be present. Approximately 50 members of the Secretive Council of 50 met in the store. They would discuss Joseph's presidential campaign and the impending move of the church, among other subjects. On May 17, 1844, the state convention for Illinois was held in Nauvoo. Few attended from outside Hancock County because of miserable weather that day that had rendered transportation almost impossible. Was this state convention to Nauvoo with invited delegates too little, too late? Did Joseph place so much secular and religious control in one location, causing surrounding towns to grow uneasy as they watched Nauvoo grow? As local politicians competed for the Mormons' block vote and neighboring Protestant communities began to be suspicious of the saints' distinct sacred ritual, Joseph Smith's red brick store was regarded as the locus of power, a fragile power ending with Joseph Smith's murder. Finally, on June 10, 1844, the city council voted in Joseph's store to destroy the press of the Nauvoo Expositor. In George Loeb's journal, edited by Eugene England, Loeb describes the city council vote in the store to remove the nuisance of the paper. Then Loeb goes on to describe a meeting held at Joseph's house. Brother Joseph called a meeting at his house and told the people that God showed him in an open vision in daylight that if he did not destroy the printing press, it would cause the blood of the saints to flow in the streets. How many restoration outposts had a store similar to Joseph's? Shortly after his arrival in Texas, Lyman White started a temple, a school, and a store in Zodiac, similar buildings that Joseph had constructed in Nauvoo. Henry Miller, after arriving in Utah, would be called to St. George to help build and conduct the St. George Cooperative store. In 1874, Henry was called to be one of the directors of the St. George Stake United Order. The Glenwood Cooperative store in Glenwood, Utah, is one of the few remaining stores built during the United Order movement with a design favoring the red brick store. And I'm not sure if you can see just above the doors, the sign, Holiness to the Lord. Joseph Smith III was aided by his mother and Captain Bideman with $2,000 worth of goods to restock the red brick store. Joseph attempted to have a thriving store, but the effort ended in 1848. In 1860, Joseph Smith III, oldest son of Joseph Smith Jr., was ordained president of the reorganization. He returned to Nauvoo after Amboy, and a new congregation, the Olive Branch, then would shortly meet in the upper room of the store. Joseph Smith III was installed as pastor. By 1890, the deserted store would be dismantled, with bricks being used for mercantile establishments on Upper Mulholland Street. But on the same spot of previous cultures, the store would find its new reincarnation as the reorganized church contemplated its sesquicentennial celebration. In closing, I'd like to quote Elder Eugene Austin Sr., a member of the Quorum of 12 Apostles. The Friends of the Red Brick Store, a group of 12 reorganized church members, agreed to make personal contributions to the total cost of reconstruction of the store. The gift of the Red Brick Store from the Friends is to all people, especially those who trace their religious heritage to Joseph Smith Jr. and the movement to which he founded. The store is a special historic site to members of both the reorganized church and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. In the reconstruction of the Red Brick Store, the Friends have not only restored a structure significant to the history of Nauvoo and Joseph Smith Jr., but have also restored a space in which many individuals share a divine encounter. It is for them a sacred space. Thank you, and we'll see you at the joyous JWHA 50th celebration.
Thank you, Jill. That was wonderful. I lost count of how many new things I learned. And one that I'm particularly excited about. For years, I have wondered if that city council meeting took place in the Red Brick Store to vote to destroy the expositor, and I could never track down a source. Incredibly exciting. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome.
We're going to move to the Q&A. And our first question is from Susan Staker. I'm fascinated by how this store functioned for Joseph, a public place with private spaces. So many firsts happened there, public and secret. Seems like such a space. The printing office of Times and Seasons seems eventually to function the same way. And I'll just throw in that Hiram's one-room brick office just next to the Red Brick Store also functioned that way.
Oh, wow.
It's crucial to Joseph's projects in secret Nauvoo. Lots of cover for why one would be going to such a place. For example, Martha Brotherton. Susan also says this kind of space makes for fine cover. So more a comment than a question.
Yeah, excellent. Excellent.
From Bryce Blankenagle. Let me get rid of that. This is a fascinating presentation. Can you recommend resources specifically on Nauvoo's economy beyond Bob Flanders' book?
Okay. Yeah, start with Bob Flanders' book. And then also, too, here's what I did, Bryce. When I could see such a close connection between the pineries and the red brick store. I spent a lot of time looking at everything having to do with the pineries. The fact that they had a company store as well, but yet you would come down to Nauvoo and settle your debts there. I thought that was an interesting part of the economy. So I would branch out to wherever you think money is being spent or where they're trying to make money.
Thank you, Jill. From Brandy Davis. Hello, you mentioned some of the records of the Red Brick Store are located in Iowa. Could you repeat where they are located and if there are any others? My ancestor Andrew Hoffman was there, but I know very little of his life at that time. He later joined with Lyman White's group in Texas.
Oh, no kidding. Okay. So was your relative then a member of the Masonic order? So that's why I went to Iowa, because they have the original register, the original day book register then. And it ended up then in the Masonic Hall. And at the very end of it, there is a piece written in pencil describing the martyrdom of Joseph Smith. And so I asked the librarian at the Masonic Library, do you think the person who wrote this was a Mason, or were they, were they a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? He did not know. So there's a lot we don't know. But it is in Cedar Rapids, Iowa. So it is it's the museum and library then for the Masonic order in Iowa.
Thank you. Susan Staker had a clarification. I was hoping my comment was a question.
Oh.
How would you talk about how this space functioned for Joseph?
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, you're right. This whole issue of public versus private land is a big one. So it seemed for Joseph that the land was all private in Nauvoo. And so, Susan, I've always wondered if there was one good Greek revival courthouse or one public library, would this have improved the situation? So we know that missionaries from the American Home Missionary Society, they're kind of surrounding Hancock County. They're just writing these vitriolic things about the church. And so I always wondered if there was just a little more public spaces, would people have been less threatened?
Thank you. From Casey Griffiths, what sources are there for how the upper floor was organized for the endowment ceremonies?
Okay, not many. There's just not a lot. So Mark McKiernan and Roger Lanius, they have a quote then that's in their monograph, and but there are not many sources. People do not write about it. They're all instructed of just what a sacred ritual it is.
From Bryce Blankenagle, follow-up, how did the Book of the Law of the Lord and temple building vouchers factor into the goods contained in the Red Brick Store?
Yeah, okay. This I'm just starting on myself. This, along with the Council of 50, I feel these are the areas that still really need to be explored with the Red Brick Store. But definitely you're going to have it recorded in the Book of the Law of the Lord. So Bryce, as I did mention, some of these, work that you would do on the temple, or if you had hogs to slaughter or whatever, would be recorded. And sometimes they're in the daybook registers, and then others are part of the Book of the Law of the Lord.
I'll throw one out, Jill. One of my favorite stories about the Red Brick Store is this steamboat full of English converts who arrives probably at the Nauvoo House landing. They immediately go to the Red Brick Store upstairs to meet their prophet for the first time. Joseph is giving them advice about getting settled into Nauvoo, and I think it's in the midst of one of the polygamy uproars, but he's talking to him, and he says, among other things, "Don't expect me to be perfect, or I'll expect the same of you." So, Jill,
Yeah.
what is one of your favorite stories about the red brick store that maybe didn't make it into your presentation?
Let's see here. Oh my goodness. So many. I think it has to be one of in the Relief Society minutes, which are just absolutely fascinating. Um, there is a story of a sister who has seen a young boy wandering through Nauvoo. And so they talk about in every single Relief Society session, who is in need of charitable help. And so someone volunteers to take this young man. I mean, but I think he's, even younger than that. So I think when they all had just so little funds that they would just put themselves first is just always thrilling to me.
Thanks. From Rachel Berkner, did the U of C have significant resources / professors familiar with Joseph, Nauvoo, and the restorative faiths?
Yeah, the University of Chicago. I remember one time I was talking with one of the professors who was helping me on my thesis. And she said, we really consider ourselves a Mormon history school. And so they didn't have a huge amount of books when I was there. I'm sure now with the Joseph Smith Papers Project, I'm sure they have all of those and many, many others. But the University of Chicago was great for me because I really didn't know a lot about 19th century storekeeping. And they had an amazing collection telling me about that. So thank you, Rachel.
Thanks. From Susan Staker, me again. Take Martha Brotherton. She was asked to go to the store, not a problem, but then she ended up in the private space with Brigham, Hiram, and Joseph. Where else could they have taken her without the gossip circuits going wild? What do you think?
Wow. Yeah, I do not know the story. So is it referring then, Susan, to polygamy? I know I have your article right here with the John Whitmer Journal.
It is. They're pressuring her to participate.
Oh, okay. All right. Excellent. Yeah, really. That's true. He had a lot of private spaces, that could be used. Really, Nauvoo is a private place. It just doesn't have a lot of public spaces at this point. So probably movements could be controlled a little bit easier.
Yeah, as Susan suggested, I think the Times and Seasons just down the street probably was in some ways similar. But Hiram's office, we've got a lot more to learn about Hiram's office. There was a lot of public activities, elections, probably a store, a lot going on there,
Okay.
as well as things like plural marriages taking place. And
okay.
So just down the street.
Yeah.
Looks like we've got another one drop in, or two. From Liz Swick, does the currency in Nauvoo relate to the Kirtland Safety Society Anti-Banking Company or Deseret Currency Association?
Yeah. So after, the Panic of 1837 is what's going to just throw everything up into total uproar. So not only with the Kirtland Safety Society, but just so many banks are going to be affected by it. And of course, the plague of paper money, especially in trying to purchase packages of land speculative contracts, that just becomes a total nightmare. So yes, I think they are connected. I think that's going to affect. I think Joseph really did want to have, in this 4-prong currency ordinance that they passed, they really were trying to have just solid species at the bottom of their system, but it just couldn't happen. There's a few other problems too. Nauvoo has a hard time breaking into with the wheat on the Mississippi River. And so you'd think with 12 to 15,000 people that we would be in on all of those exchanges, all those marketing exchanges, and we weren't. So I called Timothy Mahoney of the University of Nebraska at Lincoln and said, with our big population, why wasn't Nauvoo a part of it? And he said, I think you were too far off the national road, And he goes, it might have been about religion. He goes, but I think you were just in the wrong place. I said, that might have been because of our malarial swamps. No one stopped by. So
That's funny because Joseph III blames his failure as a storekeeper on not being able to break into the cartel that controlled the grain market.
oh, wow, no kidding. Okay, so everybody's worried about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the timber worked out, so that was a nice thing.
From Susan, yep, Hiram asked her to lie to his wife, tell her that she wanted to go to the store. Sorry to be so annoying. And we're going to finish with Bryce Blankenagle. Can't stop prodding your wealth of knowledge. Was the Red Brick store mostly stocked from St. Louis, or did it primarily serve as a bartering hub / trading post?
I would say both, but St. Louis at the beginning, that's how they're going to stock the store, is going to be from St. Louis. And then there will be more successful bartering in Nauvoo. So at this time period, you have people making about 70% of their items and having to secure 30%. So more and more, though, the nice thing about Illinois and Indiana during the Panic of 1837, we still were strong enough agricultural economies that Illinois did okay for a while. So that's how the Saints are able to have some goods in the Red Brick store.
All right. Well, thank you, Jill. I'm going to turn it back to you.
Great. Am I okay?
Yeah.
In closing, I'd just like to thank JWHA for this wonderful opportunity to serve as your president for 2 years. I've so enjoyed all the conversations, ability just to talk with you about all these kinds of issues that everyone just mentioned tonight. They're all critical to the story. I'm so thankful for all of my friends in JWHA, and I look forward to finally seeing all of you in 2 years at our 50th anniversary. At this time, it is my high honor to virtually send the presidential gavel to Christin Mackay in Nauvoo, Illinois. We are, you got it.
Thank you, Jill. And I hope while I'm talking for a couple of minutes, you'll take the opportunity to look into the chat box. There's so many messages for you there.
Oh, thank you.
We will be properly thanking Jill with the standing ovation that she deserves at our next in-person conference in Independence, Missouri next September. When Jill took office in September of 2019, I'm sure she did not imagine she'd still be president in 2021. She has truly been our pandemic president, guiding the association through these challenging times as we've just completed our second online conference. Thank you again, Jill, and thank you to the program committee and presenters and session chairs, our executive director, Cheryl Grinter, and most of all, our conference hosts. The Community of Christ Historic Sites Foundation, Wendy Eaton, Seth Bryan, Megan Reed, their executive director, Barbara Walden, who's also a past president of John Whitmer. Thank you so much for all of your hard work to make the conference a success. And now onward to Independence, where we will be celebrating our 50th anniversary as an association. As Independence's own Harry Truman once said, "Do your best, history will do the rest." Our theme for our 50th year is a legacy of restoration history, with the call for papers focused on temples, race, and gender as we explore our recent past. I've dropped the website link into the chat box so you can see where the call for papers is at on the John Whitmer website. And I look forward to sharing with you at the Independence Conference and in the next year as your president. The 50th Anniversary Committee has exciting things planned in the run-up to the conference, so be sure to check the John Whitmer website and our social media platforms throughout the year for new content. You're also going to receive a survey in your email very soon about the conference that you've just attended. Thank you for your support and attending this weekend. Have a good evening, and we will see you next year. And stay tuned for a promo about the coming conference. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Casey Griffiths, and I'm part of the committee putting together the 50th anniversary conference for the John Whitmer Historical Association. We'd like to invite you to celebrate with us this 50th anniversary conference on September 15th through 18th, 2022. The conference will be held in Independence, Missouri, in the Community of Christ Temple. Our Richard P. Howard lecturer will be Amy DeRogatis, and our keynote speaker will be Spencer McBride, who's going to talk about Joseph Smith's presidential campaign. The presidential address and the banquet will be held at the Uptown Market in Independence. Now, there's going to be a number of other special events that happen too. We'll have our regular award ceremony for the best books and best articles. We'll have a 50th anniversary bus tour that focuses on John Whitmer, his history, and some of the sites linked to his history. And we hope that we can see all of you at our 50th anniversary celebration honoring a half century of promoting the study of the history of the Restoration. See you there.